Jeffrey Kast received his Ph.D. in environmental science from the Ohio State University, where his research focused on building a multi- and interdisciplinary understanding of challenges affecting water quality in Lake Erie. His dissertation research included developing methods of integrating social science data into physical watershed models to improve simulations and analyzing the influence of national and state agricultural and environmental policies in the mid-20th century on landscape changes across Ohio. Jeffrey also holds a master's degree in food, agricultural, and biological engineering from Ohio State and a bachelor's degree in agricultural and biological engineering from the University of Florida. So the mic is yours, Jeffrey. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks all for joining today's Lunch and Learn. So today, I'm going to be describing several of the analyses that I've been conducting this year as part of my Knauss Fellowship, particularly related to the social sciences within NOAA, and specifically related to the employment and the perceptions among social scientists within the agency. Now, over the past several years, and with increasing acceleration, there have been increasing drivers for social science research and work within the federal government. Because of these drivers and their increasing numbers, I felt it was important to take stock and assess where federal agencies are with regards to their employment of social scientists to do this social science focused or related work. Now, this is particularly important within NOAA, where more and more emphasis and thus workload will fall upon social scientists in assessing the societal impacts of work completed by the agency and economic valuation of the tools and products developed by the agency. So when thinking about workforce analyses, I first want to make a couple of notes on how it is interpreted in this work. In the context of these analyses, I am focused on NOAA federal employees whose primary roles and responsibilities lie within the social sciences and whose performance evaluations that are thus undertaken in this context. So it is those employees employed within the O1XX OPM job group, the Office of Personnel Management job group, otherwise known as the Social Science, Psychology, and Welfare group. Now further, I am looking at those employees within this O1XX job group who hold occupations related to the O101 social sciences, the O110 economist, the O180 psychologist, O184 sociology, and O190 general anthropology occupations. Now, I do want to point out that the agency does employ social scientists in contractor roles and also in other OPM occupations, such as program and management analyst. But because, in the case of the latter, their roles do not center around the social sciences, and in the case of the former, their information is not readily available in publicly accessible ways, these two groups of employees are excluded from these analyses. So with all this said, the analyses that I have conducted have led to some insight into some really interesting topics that I'll be diving into today. So for instance, we can assess line office populations of various occupations. We can compare factors, numerous factors between various occupations, such as turnover rates and other employment characteristics. And then we can also assess perceived challenges by line office and occupation. Now, before going into the NOAA specific results from these analyses, I first want to put NOAA's federal social science workforce in context within the larger federal ecosphere. So at the close of fiscal year 2021, 262 executive agencies employed at least one social, behavioral, or economic scientist. And you'll be seeing I'll be interchangeably using social science and social behavioral economic science, or SBE, throughout this presentation. And what we find within the larger federal ecosphere, that NOAA ranks towards the middle of the pack when comparing the number of SBE scientists to the agency's total federal workforce. So for example, EPA at this time employed 207 SBE scientists, which comprise 1.4% of their total federal workforce, whereas within NOAA, about 0.9% of the total federal workforce was employed as an SBE scientist. So from this data, we see that NOAA's SBE workforce makes up less than 1% of the agency's total federal workforce. But diving deeper into the agency, we see two interesting points. First, as seen on the figure on the right, about 70% of SBE employees within the agency are housed in fisheries. We also find that about 70% of SBE employees in the agency work as economists or hold an O110 economic or economist occupation. So when we think about the social, behavioral, and economic sciences across the agency, we see that the space is dominated by fisheries and by economists. Now, this isn't a surprise, given the regulatory mandates that fisheries has to conduct this type of work. But when we think about this and we think of this data, what does this mean for the capacity of other line offices and other corporate offices to conduct social science analyses? Is there the capacity to do this work now? And then how is that capacity going to change in the future as more and more drivers will be put in place to engage in that type of work? So as I previously mentioned, with the workforce analysis, we can compare various occupations to one another across a variety of factors. The next several slides will show some of these comparisons. So in the figure here, we are looking at the accessions and the separations of NOAA federal employees employed within a physical science occupation or within the 13XX physical science OPM job group between fiscal years 2005 and 2021. And they're broken down by age, as you can see on the x-axis. And I want to highlight two things here with this figure. The first is a spike in separations when you hit the retirement age and the general stable separations in the younger ages. Now, the second thing to point out is the peak in ascensions between the ages of 20 and 29. So what we see from this, the physical scientists across this time period enter the agency at a young age and leave when they hit retirement. Now let's compare that to the agency's social scientists. And right away with this figure, you might notice a couple of things. First is the bimodal peaks of separations. Between fiscal years 2005 and 2021, we have seen that many social scientists have left the agency in the early part of their career. In this case, between the ages of 25 and 34. And we also see that agencies come into the agency, or we see the social scientists come into the agency at later ages, mostly between the ages of 25 and 34. So a takeaway from this is that social scientists within NOAA have left the agency's workforce at earlier ages than physical scientists. And then also at greater rates. The figure here shows box plots for the annual turnover rates broken down by OPM job group between fiscal years 2005 and 2021. The two box plots that I have boxed in red, the one on the left is for social scientists, the one on the right is for physical scientists. And although you may be looking at the figure and seeing the median hovers around 5% turnover rate, if we look at the 5% level, significance level, we do see that there is greater turnover rates for social scientists than physical scientists, again, within this time period. And so when we look at this data, this finding, as well as the findings from the previous two slides I presented on, it leads to a really interesting question, and that is why? Why do we see social scientists in the agency turning over at greater rates than physical scientists? Why do we see social scientists leaving the agency's federal workforce at earlier ages than physical scientists? And if we think down the road, how are these workforce trends going to impact the agency's ability to engage and achieve the increasing demands that will be placed on social scientists to conduct those economic evaluations and societal impacts? And so thinking about these why questions, I developed and administered a survey to federal social scientists within the agency to gauge their thoughts on challenges that social scientists within NOAA face. Now, the sample for the survey that was administered in September consisted of all those SBE scientists who were employed within the agency at the end of fiscal year 2021, and then still present in the agency as of September 1st, 2022. And then again, looking at the various social science occupations within the agency, we find that the O101 social science, the O110 economist, and the 0190 general anthropologist occupations were found in the agency. So that was, again, those who received the survey. And so looking at the adjusted response rate of the survey, we found that it was about 52%. Now, from the survey results, several big themes emerged. First, there is a perceived lack of understanding among non-social scientists in the agency on what the social sciences are and their value to achieve the agency's mission. About 70% of survey respondents indicated that non-social scientists within NOAA had little to no understanding on what the social sciences are. And this is something that's actually not new. In 2003, the NOAA Science Advisory Board released a report from their assessment of the social sciences within the agency and found that a lack of social science literacy was a major issue. Now, the second big challenge is staffing, and staffing was actually the most pressing challenge that social scientists feel that they face in the agency. If we were to look back at the end of fiscal year 2021 and just the employment numbers, we find that for every one SBE scientist within the agency, there were approximately 60 physical and biological scientists as well, compared to that one SBE scientist. So third major challenge was program planning, particularly related to funding. The lack of sufficient funding for SBE work was identified as the second most pressing challenge. And again, this challenge was also identified by previous NOAA Science Advisory Board assessments of the social sciences in the agency. And then the fourth big challenge is career development. And actually, it is in this bucket that I'll be diving a bit deeper over the next several slides, particularly as it relates to opportunities for promotion. So before diving deeper into these some more detailed survey results, I first want to orient everyone to what they're going to be seeing on this slide, as 5 of the next slides will look like this. So here on the right-hand side is the survey item that was asked within the survey, and then the figure is the responses to that survey item, broken down by occupation, so comparing responses of economists to those of the social sciences and a general anthropologist. So what we find with this question when asking about are there general opportunities for promotion within NOAA for social, behavioral, and economic scientists, we find that many social scientists disagree that these opportunities exist. However, when looking at the data and looking at this figure, we find that economists were more likely to agree with the statement that there are promotion opportunities for SBE scientists within the agency than non-economists. And further, if we look at it by line office, we found that 88% of those who agreed with this statement were actually housed within the fisheries office. So when asked about, similar again to promotion opportunities, but this time not just generally, but within their current occupation, so thinking about an economist being promoted to another economist position, or an 0101 social scientist being promoted to another 0101 social scientist position, we found that there were more agreements that there were these opportunities among economists, again, than other SBE scientists in the agency. And then again, respondents in fisheries comprised most of these quote-unquote agree responses, with 82% of the agreement responses coming from those in fisheries. Now, among other line offices, we found those within the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, or OAR, had respondents answer only with a disagreement or strongly disagree. So when now asked about if a social, behavioral, and economic scientist would need to change their occupation to receive a promotion and thus no longer be employed as an SBE scientist. So if you think about it, an 0101 social scientist, in order to receive a promotion, would have to transition to an 0343 program and management analyst occupation to receive that promotion. We see there's quite a bit of agreement with this statement. Now, of those who agreed that this is the case, or would be the case, social scientists, economists within fisheries and the ocean service comprised of those who agreed or strongly agreed in this sentiment. And so what all this tells us is that there are not many perceived opportunities for promotion for non-economists or those not within fisheries among the social, behavioral, and economic scientists within the agency. However, we find that SBE scientists are generally satisfied with their job. All line offices had at least one respondent indicate that they were satisfied or strongly satisfied with their position or with their job. And in fact, when looking at the data, about 71% of respondents indicated positively to the survey item. And in this case, positively, responding positively, meaning they were either satisfied or strongly satisfied. However, about 33% of respondents feel that the workload is not reasonable, which we can see is greater than the average response for NOAA's federal employees that they felt on this survey item that was asked in the 2020 Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, which was the last data point that I could find at this agency level. So although we see that SBE scientists within the agency are satisfied with their job, many feel that their workload is not reasonable. And I think this is something important to think about, as again, these drivers are increasing and more workload will be placed upon social scientists to engage in the work that needs to be done to meet those drivers. So in conclusion, we found over these analyses that about 70% of the SBE scientists within the agency are located in fisheries, and about 70% are employed as economists. We see that SBE scientists have left the agency's federal workforce at younger ages and at greater rates than physical scientists. Some of the challenges that were identified over about 20 years ago, if not more, by the NOAA Science Advisory Board and other groups, still persist today. And that although NOAA's social, behavioral, and economic scientists are generally satisfied with their job, they perceive they have few opportunities for promotion, and about 1/3 believe their workload is unreasonable. So taking this all together with this mixed methods approach that I've taken here, I think it can help give us some deeper insight into some of the workforce challenges that the agency has faced over the past 15, 16 years and still are working through today, and can aid and help the agency work towards developing a world-class workforce that can meet the challenges of today and the growing ones of tomorrow, such as, again, the increased focus on evaluating societal impacts. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge my two Knauss mentors, Alison Krepp and Gina Esco, who are also the co-authors on these analyses, the NOAA Social Science Committee and friends, Kast and John for their assistance in pre-testing my SBE survey, and then the Knauss fellowship program, as this work would not have been completed if I was not on the program. And with that, I will be happy to take questions.